I sent out an email after the Dr. Phil estrangement episodes, just curious about estranged parents' response to what they saw on those two episodes. And you came back with a really interesting, insightful set of observations that I just really wanted to dig into a little further. You said that you're going to be going on almost 3 years estranged from your youngest son, and I'm very
Yeah.
sorry. I understand the pain. And
Thanks.
you noted that you kind of disagreed with, I think it was Dr. Coleman who attributed this phenomenon, in terms of external sources, when you look outside the parent-child relationship, as a rise in individualism. You thought it was more than that. Can you kind of unpack that a little bit for us?
Yeah. Well, and just to be fair, I haven't read his books. I didn't want to. I'm always a little leery of experts, and I know that he's associated with a nonprofit is the council. What is it? The Council for I gotta look here. The Council on Contemporary Family. So right there, he's talking about, modernism. And yeah, they always sometimes are pushing an agenda, even though they're creating an agenda that they're pushing. So it gets iffy to me. And I'm always suspicious of the new expert, like who made them an expert, right? But in my opinion, it's more of this victim society we're creating. Like everyone's a victim, everyone's oppressed. It's kind of interesting. They call it individualism. America's always been an individualistic society. So if we're going more to that, I would think that's always been, as was mentioned on the Dr. Phil show, God, family, country, right? So I don't think it's that. I agree with some of what they say with the social media and things like that having an impact, and more of this therapized society we have going on.
Right.
It seems like everybody has a therapist nowadays, which I would like to point out. We have more therapists, and yet mental illness is increasing. So the more the more therapy people get, the more oppressed or victim they feel, it seems. But anyway, I've worked with parents for many, many years now, mainly because I went through a divorce and I kind of learned some things. I thought I was a really good parent, and there were things I wasn't doing right. So I learned some communication skills, conflict skills, and I wanted to help other people do that. So, but in that work, I've kind of realized that people have kind of skewed views of relationships. Like they're really looking for that perfect relationship. And they look at every relationship across the board as needing to be balanced, a balance of power. And, in my early work, I started to talk to people who were saying, this is working great with my significant other or my kids. But at work, when I talk to my boss, he won't validate my feelings and it's making me feel very uncomfortable. And he's very abusive there because he ignores me or, doesn't want to hear what I have to say about his company. And I started to realize, wow, that's like people don't understand. There's differences between the way we relate to our boss or our kids or even our spouse. There's differences, or your neighbor. They don't all need to hear our whole life story or to validate us or praise us for the things we do, So I just feel like we let all the kids get participation trophies, and we're trying to create this equality everywhere. And we're just not all equal. We're all unique and different situations, different stories, different backgrounds. And that's a great thing. We should really celebrate that.
So can we back up a little bit? I want to just touch on your work as a parent educator and how your own experience led you into that line of work. And then I want to jump back into some of your observations here that you made around those ideas of relationships and the inequality that is by necessity built into some of these relationships. But
Yeah.
first, tell us a little bit about your work.
Sure. So initially I was going to become a therapist myself, and then there were some things that happened that actually led me into the field of mediation, which again, we have mediators now are a dime a dozen, and we have more conflict than we've ever had before. So I'm not sure. I just saw some failings there too. In that people expect to have this healing and restoration in like a 3 or 4 hour session. That's not realistic, but it can open some doors. And I would just say here too, that might be something families might consider is trying community mediation. Most counties offer free or low cost, so you could at least open that door. I don't think it's a fix all, but it's an opening to maybe something more. Um, but then also through that work, I was working with divorced parents because that was the really life-changing thing for me, for my family, my kids. And so I wanted to help people. We were actually in the system for a long time, because our views were different from the system views,
The system, you mean what?
like family court.
Family court. Okay.
People think that it's where you're going to have a winner and a loser, and they're actually promoting a win-win kind of, let's be friends kind of thing, which was a little bit counterintuitive to me because it's like, well, we probably should have done this before we got divorced, right? We're going to learn all these skills and now we're going to be best friends. And again, in that system, we're divorced. So it shouldn't be this where we're telling each other everything. And, um, so that changed a lot of things. But I found that some of the one-on-one work I did was very rewarding for me and clients. Like people who have grown up in a really dysfunctional family where they didn't learn open communication and things like that. They don't realize that they didn't learn these good skills. You think it's just, hey, we did okay, and sometimes we do, sometimes it affects us all over. So that was where I decided to focus, was more in education instead of, just kind of spending a couple hours with two people who are really not happy with each other. I found it more powerful when each person can learn some things and develop these skills and be ready then to try to come together. If we skip that part, like either one of us is not going to be ready to have these conversations or feel safe,
Right.
and here I'll just point out too, are we unsafe or are we uncomfortable? There's a huge difference in
Mm.
that, right? Is it abusive or is it just making me nervous or anxious? And you would expect that with someone you want to get close to and maybe haven't seen for a few years. It is hard to start having those conversations. Um, so I just started doing more one-on-one work and helping parents really build those bonds that are so important. But even saying that, my own son has had these influences, and you know, it's something with both of us, right? He went through a an awful time with us when he was young, both his dad and I. And while we're correcting mistakes we made, I think he felt left out or confused about what was going on. And now he has these influences that I think came after a traumatic life event that he had. He was actually engaged and they broke up, and made him question things about himself. And then it made him, I think, anyway, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but I feel like I got the blame of it. We have to look for blame. So that's kind of something I noticed on the Dr. Phil show, is that the people on the show didn't seem to have any insight into their own behavior as much as the other person, you know.
That's what all my commenters that are the adult children say about me.
Right.
Based on watching a few
Exactly.
videos. Yeah, that's an interesting point. One of the things that you brought up too was that in your work, you said that what you're seeing out there through the school and psychology, young people are being taught, and you mentioned this earlier, that they are equals and have a voice in every relationship. And
Right.
you said that they don't seem to understand the different types of relationships or the balances of power that come within those, meaning you said that you noticed anyone who doesn't validate everything they think, they see as abusive. So I'm
Right.
wondering if you can talk a little bit to those points.
Sure. And like the people in the workplace, they kind of want to come in and like have a therapy session with their boss. Like, you're making me feel bad, making me do all this work. And yet, so I had a client one time, and it was in a divorce situation, that we worked together. And she was like just learning new ways of communicating, being more open, sharing her feelings. But I didn't mean when I was teaching her these skills, it was for her co-parent and her kids. And I didn't mean you go to work and you tell them, I'm just feeling so bad today and people treat me bad. You're there to do a job. That person hired you to do work for them, not to get therapy sessions during the day or even to feel good about yourself. You were brought in to do a task, right? So I have noticed this with some people, that they don't know how to separate their feelings now. If they learn to express their feelings, they want to do it everywhere, and everyone should understand them, and we're all equal. It's all a level playing field. But that's not even true. And with parent and child, parents are responsible for our kids when they're kids. I know some schools want to pretend that they're the parent, right? They're keeping information from parents nowadays, and things that never would have been allowed years ago. You're the parent, you're the one legally responsible if they do something wrong and they're under 18. So, we are teaching our kids, we're correcting our kids' bad behavior, because we're the parent. There's a responsibility in that, not just the right to have my child, but we're responsible for them too. So that's this higher level of authority. And really, people just can't deal with authority figures these days. They just can't. And they don't ever want to be told they're doing something wrong.
Yeah, interesting. I know that what you see online is not the whole world, and it tends to be a
Right.
vocal minority. So I always have to remind myself of that. But I have seen a lot of these videos put out by younger teachers who are really frustrated with the kids in the schools and how they won't be quiet, they won't put their phones away, they don't respect authority. There's this whole notion of gentle parenting, which sounds all warm and fuzzy, but
Right.
is it creating another generation of young tyrants in some instances? I'm not saying this is all parents. I'm not saying this is all kids, but there are we're like a very complex civilization is complex.
Yeah.
Humans do specialized jobs, and that's how we keep civilization together. And with specialization comes this need to, sometimes you have one guy or gal in charge of a bunch of other people, and they need to just get a job done so that the machine works, so that the customers are happy, so that the company gets paid, so that they can pay their employees. And yes, we want to be as nice as possible in the culture, but ultimately we need to get the job done and make a little bit of
Right.
profit so we can keep doing it. But there's this whole narrative that, oh, it's capitalism is evil and the patriarchy is controlling you. And maybe some of this is filtered into education. That's kind of the vibe I'm getting. And we're getting some unintended consequences from what seems like a great idea. Let's make everybody and everyone equal. But if you want to keep a complex civilization with many, 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 many layers together, that may not work out. So
Right.
curious your reaction.
Well, it's interesting to me. I because it had been a while since the Dr. Phil show, so I rewatched it before we were going to talk, and I noted that Dr. Coleman said, those days of honor your mother and father or respecting your elders are over. They're done. And I thought, that's a horrible thing. Like, why would we want that? Right? I mean, families families are a system, and hopefully you're building these relationships where you support each other, not just you know I'm the mom, so I have to make sure my kids get everything they want and are made to feel good all the time, no matter what they do. Who's telling mom that she's doing a good job, or who's making mom feel good then? But also, we raise our kids, and there were generations where, as parents get older, those kids take care of the parent too. I mean, is that over now? Who's going to take care of us? The government? I mean, I do think that's what they want overall, is if we don't have families, if we don't have people who love and care about us, then we go to the government or the psychologist or someone else going to teach us how to be in the world. And yep, America is different from international, you know, so they want it's this individualism versus collectivism, and a lot of these places and systems do not want individualism. So they say it's a problem, right? We're gonna pretend that's the problem, so you help us get rid of that evil beast. And unfortunately, this stuff is in every system. I've seen it with trainings I've been in. So, I've been a part of like family law trainings. I've been a part of educational. I worked for a year as a middle school teacher, and kids are always accusing the adults of doing something wrong. I had one time where the kids all ganged up. They were texting each other. So I knew they were up to something. I was a new teacher, and, I did make them call me by my last name. We're not friends here. I'm the teacher, you're the student. There's supposed to be this level of respect for adults. And so they had accused me of saying things I didn't say. Now, what's interesting about it is classrooms have cameras. So you can view the
Wow.
camera. They have to have certain requirements to watch videos of a classroom, though, but they could have checked if they wanted. But so I got called into the office. They were like, oh, these kids all came and said that you said these nasty words to them. And I said, I did not. I wasn't letting them do what they wanted to do, which was not the homework. They wanted to play a game, go outside. I don't remember exactly what it was. And, what I was told was, well, we have to believe the kids. That's just we validate the kids, we believe what they say, because it's diversity and, you're white and whatever. And it's like, really? Because sometimes kids are not telling the truth. Sometimes adults are not telling the truth. We can't really go through the world thinking everybody is true about everything they say all the time. you
That is
know.
so interesting, this experience. I mean, these
Mhm.
kids are learning from a very young age that they can mob together using texting or social media or whatever little device they have and just create some mob and gang up on someone and
Yeah.
get them in trouble.
Yeah.
That is stunning.
And there's really no discipline anymore, which that's something as a parent educator. A lot of people think discipline means to punish, but discipline actually means to teach. But there's some truth in an idea that kids need correct connection before correction, and I would agree with that. But I think it's taken too far. Like, at the school I worked at, kids wandered the hall all day. There were some kids who won't go to school. They swear at staff, they threaten people, and nobody does anything. And I could go into a whole different tangent, but this diversity, equity, and inclusion stuff that's made its way into every system we have, it is uh it's too far for one thing, and they do that with some of these ideas, right? The idea on the face of it is a good idea, but they take it to these bizarre ends that really they're trying to accomplish something else with these agendas they have. And I mean, all the training I went to was, you're on occupied land. This American land is stolen from the Native Americans and blah, blah, blah. And the tribe, you're on this, it's oppression. So there, in every system, we're training the people who work there that, you've been oppressing people. And so you need to step back and allow them more power. So I see that with kids in school where, and parents are afraid to discipline too, because, oh, somebody's going to call and report you to child protection. Then you're stuck in that system, you know?
Yeah.
So it's a really crazy world. It's a really hard time to parent. And I did notice in the Dr. Phil show, they said about 70% of estranged children are their families went through divorce.
Wow.
And I
Yeah.
do know, yeah, that's
I
huge.
hadn't remembered that. That's actually huge. Yeah.
Yeah. But I think, when you're going through that as a parent, it's a very stressful experience. It's expensive. Um, Nobody really realizes how much that's going to cost you and how long it's going to take. And, I will say emotionally, I probably wasn't available to my kids at certain points during all of that. And that's a hard thing. But again, where's the forgiveness? Where's the resilience? Where are we teaching kids coping skills? Because I've talked to my kids about that. I feel terrible about how things went. And if I could go back and do it differently, I certainly would. Knowing what I knew coming out, I would have done things differently. But, I didn't know. I was doing the best that I could with the situation I was given. And I think it's important that we teach our kids we're not perfect. Nobody is ever perfect. There are no perfect parents, not one. I don't care who it is, they're not perfect. There are no perfect psychologists either. I'll tell you that. Now, I like Dr. Phil because he's got some common sense, and I think
Yeah.
we're lacking some of that. But, I've had psychologists as clients who are going through divorce and, trying to figure this out, and they get triggered. I had one who laid face down on the floor in my office because we were talking about her communicating with her ex-spouse, soon to be ex-spouse. And she laid face down on the floor in my office and said, I'm triggered. I can't do it right now. I'm triggered. And I just thought, and you're helping other people. Like, maybe you should take a leave of absence right now or something. But, they too have been trained that everyone's been oppressed except for, white men mainly. And then we've got the intersectionality, if you're familiar with that.
Yes, the point system. Yes.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
we gotta, the worse off you are in that, the more we have to raise you up, and we come down and validate everything you say because we can't understand you, right? So they
Yeah, yeah. And
uh,
the unintended consequences to all of this seems to be people who are very black and white thinkers. You're either with
yes,
me or you're against me. You're this group or you're that group. And a lot of the same talking points. And it seems like a lack of empathy for, each other as flawed human beings. We're
right.
all flawed human beings. We all make mistakes. We all need to say, sorry, I made mistakes as a parent. If I could say sorry, I would, but I can't talk to her. It's not allowed.
I
So,
know.
it just, I need to respect her space and I'm doing that. And that's, they
Yep.
hate it when we say that's the best we can do, but really it is what it is. That's the best I can do. So
Right.
it's very interesting the angle that you were, what I was most interested in was that you were, I think it was, I hadn't really heard anyone talk about the balance of power in relationships and that the kids were all coming in. And when I say kids, I mean the young people, whatever. I
Right,
don't mean to be
right.
disrespectful. The
Exactly.
young folks were coming in and they had this expectation of equality in all things, every relationship.
Yes.
And I just thought it was interesting that, well, no, we can't always do that if we're going to be efficient as a society working together, because we are people working together. So, kind of
Right.
given this discussion that we've had, do you have any thoughts about, okay, well, what can we do to maybe improve the situation or fix the situation or maybe heal some of the divide? Do you have any ideas?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's kind of hard, when it's so broken, and for people who, it's years and years. I'm always hopeful that my son will come back. I keep things open. I was texting a phone number. Now he had changed his phone number not too long before he stopped talking to me. And I would text every once in a while just to say, hey, thinking of you, hope you're doing well. I love you, and I wasn't getting any response. And I wasn't doing it a lot, just periodically, not even a regular, I hate the idea of, weekly or annually, that one lady said on the Dr. Phil thing. And I thought, if somebody just reached out to me annually, I'd think they don't care about me, once a year on my birthday, great. But just, when you're thinking about it and you're in a good place so that you're not going to make it about them or say too emotionally charged things. Um, but I found out it was a work number. I had a lady call and say, hey, who's texting? This is a business number. We can't have those texts. So I don't text anymore. But I think if parents can, just periodically to reach out with a short and sweet, simple, you know, kind of benign, thinking of you text, email if you can. But I've also used some e-cards. That's one way I can. I don't email. I mean, I used to once in a while, but I really don't just send emails because he'll read things into what I say, right? Like it's taken completely wrong or whatever. So I do send like e-cards that there's free ones out there you can just send. It'll go to their email. Some of them can text it. And just, if it's his birthday or just a thinking of you again, just a simple card. I don't put much in it. I let the card speak. That's another way. Let me just see. I had written some things here. Um, Oh, maybe keep a journal for yourself that if someday they're maybe they want to read it and just see what you were really thinking about the situation and missing them. As long as you don't go too overboard again, you have to be careful of alienating them. So if they're taking
Yeah,
it from a different perspective than what it's intended, then
there's really no right answer. Every single situation between parent and child is different. I know we'll get some comments under this, outraged that you would even reach
yeah,
out, but I don't know what the terms of the estrangement were. They're always different. Some kids say, don't contact me at all. Don't contact me unless it's a family emergency. Sometimes there's no
right,
instruction whatsoever. And so you have to kind of feel your way through the situation. And, and then parents, of course, we were raised with this expectation, or maybe it's just an assumption that, if, oh, you're a loving mother, well, you should reach out because that's what loving mothers do. And you're just trying to do the right thing. And you don't realize that in today's world, with the black and white thinking, that that's a critical breach of boundaries for some people. How dare you?
right,
So
yeah.
it's like,
So you
okay,
don't want to poke the bear, right? Approach
no.
slowly.
Yeah, it's pretty tricky. Well, Susan, is there anything else that you wanted to share that you've learned along the way on this journey?
Yeah, well, I'll just add to the e-card idea. One nice thing about it is if they do open it, you get a notification that they've opened it. You don't know what they think of it, but at least you know that it got to them. So I kind of like that idea. The only other thing I wanted to point out is how reactive people are. Like they very instead of one of the things I teach is responding versus reacting, and the younger people, I mean, they just fly off the handle and you don't even know what you said. So I'm not sure where exactly that's coming from, but I do think we're not giving kids coping skills if we're not challenging them a little bit, like, giving them some feedback, which is, of course, different than criticism, but, we all need constructive feedback. I don't mind getting that myself. It helps us grow. But yeah, so, and parents need to be cognizant of when they're being reactive instead of taking that pause to think about what they want to say or how they want to react to being accused of something. You can't be reactive. That's just going to blow things up. But if you can think of a kind, gentler response, that's always better.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you that taking a really deep breath, or two or three or five, and just standing in that pause before you react, and then even sometimes saying, I need a moment to process this, and just going away and thinking it through before you vomit on the
Right.
situation is a fabulous practice for parents, for kids, for anybody in any relationship, because us yelling at each other just, doesn't help. And I've done plenty of that in my day.
Yeah.
And,
Right.
maybe, yeah, I'm
Yeah.
learning too, just like every other person is out there learning. We're all learning. So,
We are. Yeah. And
anyway,
relationships are always in progress. We don't just get in them and they're solved, right? I don't know if people think that they want to have this relationship, but they want to have the one they saw in a movie, right? The perfect mom, or whatever, perfect dad.
that's right.
But life isn't a movie. It has things that happen, and hopefully we can all learn to support each other, and especially these, we're talking about adult children here, and if they can't have some kind of respect for their parents and recognize that we have feelings too, how are they going to have a significant relationship anywhere? So I hope things change. I don't know what the answer is. I wish I did, but I think we've got to get away from this not recognizing everybody as unique individuals with different thoughts and feelings and reactions to things. You know, you might see something and feel one way about it, and I'm going to feel a different way, and that's okay. You know, it's okay to respond differently.
Yes, live and let live is something I think that needs to make a comeback.
Yeah, for
Agree to
sure.
disagree. That's another one I would love to see come back, into our world.
And at the end of
Well,
the day, you know, we don't make people feel a certain way. That's their feelings. So they do kind of need to own that and work on that too. If they feel insecure in a relationship, they can work on that, and then they're going to learn how to express that and get their needs met instead of just demanding, I demand you, you know, coddle me.
yes, we all need to own our own reactions, our failures, our successes. We all need to own up to that. Accountability always comes up in the comments. But I think we also need to be accepting more of ourselves and our own
Yes.
flaws. I think when you're able to accept, you know, your wins, your losses, your successes, your failures, and just say, okay, I messed up, I learned, I'm sorry, let's move on. And I think
Right.
maybe some of the anger that comes across, especially in my comments, is it's a veiled self-loathing I just think people, for some reason, or at least the ones who, get up all in the comments. It's
Yeah.
not the whole population of the world. I think people are very harsh on themselves and critical of themselves and critical. And then as a defense mechanism, which seems natural, and I'm not a therapist. I'm just a mom who's been through this. I've been through a lot
Right.
of life. I've seen a lot of things happen in a lot of relationships. And I know that people, when they're insecure, they will sometimes lash out and project onto
Yeah.
others as a defense for protecting their fragile self, and I'm not mocking the
Right.
fragile self. I have empathy for that self. And I think they just, it's going to sound kumbaya, but you
Yeah.
really do need to, love and appreciate yourself and be grateful for what you have. And okay, you don't have everything you want. Your mom's not perfect, your dad's not perfect, and maybe you truly were abused. I know there's a lot of people out there that were truly
Right.
abused, who went through horrific things, who really need a good therapist to help them through that. And I totally respect
Yes.
that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think we just need to learn to be a little more like self-forgiving, and then it's easier
Right.
to be forgiving for others and get along.
Yeah. And
So
that's so true. You know, some of these situations, the estrangement, in my opinion, is not necessarily, sometimes it is something a parent did or said, and other times it's shame or guilt on the part of that child, and they don't want to face that either. So you don't know. It's a mix of things that happen. Relationships are a two-way street. So it is a matter of how we interact together. And sometimes we haven't adapted to the other person's different ways, you know. Some people are very outspoken, some are very quiet and hide their feelings, you know. So the whole thing is getting to know each other. And our kids do change and evolve as adults. You know, we may think they're a certain way because of how we remember them as, you know, growing up, but now they're developing their own ideas. And there is that thing with the front brain, you know, our front brain develops and it's fully developed, they say, around 26 years old. So it's those years in between. Sometimes we do dumb things in our early 20s
we
and make
all
poor
do.
choices. Yeah. And then the fixing of it's hard, you know, that if you if you have stayed away for a while, opening that door, it can be really scary. So I think as parents, we just, you know, make them know that we're here if we can, if we have a way that we can contact them somehow. You know, sometimes you don't, and that's really hard. But you know, you do, if you can, I would keep that open, just some way of letting them know you're open and it doesn't matter, you'll listen.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, Susan, thank you so much for taking all this time to, kind of revisit that email and have
Yeah,
this conversation. I am actually looking forward to seeing what the comments are down below. I would just ask that people please be respectful. I have
right,
no problem with differing opinions. I just ask you to please be nice and respectful, and please stop throwing the labels around. It's just not helpful. And
right.
yeah, really, really interested to see what people think about this going forward.